Hello, and welcome to the latest HR on the Offensive Live. It's me, Chris Howard, calling. No, I'm just doing a live stream from within Lace Towers, the Lace HQ. And I've got a fabulous partner in crime with me, as always. It's Steph Abel from Lace. Steph, you all right?
Yeah, I'm good, thank you. Thanks for having me, Chris.
Hey, always good to have you back on. We did Best Friend at Work last time for the live stream, but we're doing something a little bit different today, aren't we?
Yeah, who needs a friend when you can unboss?
Yes, exactly. And Steph has just given you a little bit of an insight into the conversation that we want to have today. Now, we've been reading about a couple of articles in the press, in the HR press, but actually the business press as well, talking about this thing called great unbossing. And I think it's quite an interesting topic to delve into. Now, caveat, because we are not going to go into extreme detail on this particular live stream. And the reason why is because Steph, myself, and one of our colleagues, Marcus, are actually going to do a podcast on it. If you are not familiar of the podcast that we have, it's you can find it HR on the Offensive. It's HR on the Offensive podcast, which is lacepartners.co.uk/podcast, and you get access to all of our back catalogue as well. I think we've done something like 220 pods on everything, anything to do with HR, people strategy, employee experience, payroll, people and workforce analytics, the whole gamut. So you can check that one out. But today we're going to focus on this concept of great unbossing. And I wanted to get Steph on just to kind of help us to set the scene. And I guess, Steph, to talk a little bit about what it actually means, because as you and I were talking this morning before we went live, there's a bit of a kind of misconception, or there's differing views, isn't there? So can you just tell our audience a little bit about, I guess we'll start with, what is it? What's the whole, this whole concept of great unbossing that we've seen in the press?
So when I first read an article, it almost sounded as if, okay, is this the new phrase for like delayering? Because it sounded as if you was almost like wiping out middle management. But the more that we've looked into it and we've heard a lot more about, it's more about a modern approach, moving away from some of that traditional hierarchical management, more towards creating more autonomy, empowering your managers, rather than having like micromanagers. So it's getting your managers to act like leaders and facilitators and coaches. So it's more around repurposing the manager role.
Yeah, exactly. And what we're going to do when we go through the podcast, again, as I said, we're going to talk in a little bit more detail. That podcast, we're recording it this week, but it probably won't come out for a few weeks now. But we're going to go into a few kind of pros and cons, because I think it's quite easy to see, Steph, like a title like unbossing and immediately think of it as almost having negative connotations. But as you've been looking into as well, and I want you to give our audience a little bit of a bit of information, if that's all right, kind of like maybe one pro and then one con or negative around unbossing as a concept. And then we'll talk very, very briefly, just as we wrap up the live stream, about kind of, you know, where could this potentially go in future, just kind of as a final takeaway. But can you just give us a little bit of a flavor as to one, we'll do a few when we do the podcast, but one pro and then one con on great bossing. So we'll start with the pro.
Okay, so one obvious pro here is a significant positive is the increase around the employee engagement and the job satisfaction. So we know from lots of research out there that when employees feel like trusted and given more autonomy to make decisions, they often feel more valued and motivated. And then, you know, a potential downside to this could be around without certain oversight, or some employees feel like they might struggle with not having a manager. If you don't get those conditions right, you could start having employees that feel a bit devalued, or that could lead in some issues like quiet quitting as well.
Yeah, and we've done a couple of pieces on like quiet quitting. We've done a couple of pieces on a few of the fads. It feels to me, Steph, like the buzzwords are quite a commonplace post-pandemic. I know we've always had buzzwords, but there seems to have been an increase on. We've heard great resignation, the great re-engagement. We've heard unbossing, as we're talking about great unbossing. There's whole there's a whole gamut of different kind of buzzwords out there. So I guess just as we kind of wrap up on this very, very short stream that we wanted to do today, just as our kind of teaser for the pod, again, I'll drop the link on the visual now, just so that people can access it if they want to. But perhaps we can just leave our listeners with a little bit of an overview as to kind of this idea that, is it just another fad? Or I guess my real question is, ignore the kind of buzzword of it. Is this something that you think, or we think at Lace Partners, we're going to see quite an increase of over time with organizations trying that, as you put it right at the start, deep ring?
Yeah. I wish I had my partner in crime with me here, like Marcus, who we'll have on the podcast later, because this is something that we really have discussed and thought about in great detail. I want to take I'm on the fence on it right now to then give you this definitive when we're on the podcast. But I do think it doesn't work for everybody, and it will certainly depend on what organisation you're from and the maturity of your organisation. So I do think there's certain conditions that you have to have that are right for this to be successful and for it to work. And the whole unbossing piece, there's almost like an agility piece that goes with it around decision making, the autonomy. So to have that, I think you do need certain conditions, which could be quite hard to get for some organizations that might aspire to be like this. So I'm kind of on the fence on that right now.
Yeah, no, I think that's understood, really. It's a bit like we've just run our HR operating model campaign, demystifying HR operating model. If you go to lacepartners.co.uk/insights or go into our campaign section, you can find out all about that. But in that, we talk about this exact same thing. There is no one size fits all when it comes to operating model, because it depends on things like your business drivers. You've got some businesses that are geared up for hyper growth, and they're in a different position that organizations that have, we talk about agility, rapid growth. We talk about customer centricity and productivity, as well as those kind of different drivers. So it really depends on objectives of the business. Like, what do you actually want to achieve from your kind of the way in which you're designing your organization? What's your kind of approach to your workforce planning of the future? There's a whole, as we were talking about before, and there's a whole different direction, different directions that organizations can go when thinking about, okay, how do we want to structure our business? How do we want to design our business?
Yeah.
I'm going to leave it. I'm going to leave it there for today, unless there's any kind of final thoughts from you, Steph, ahead of the podcast. But Ken, just as a reminder, we're going to do a pod. We're going to release that in a couple of weeks' time. Look out for some pros, some cons, and just starting to delve into some of the nuances around this idea of great bossing. Steph, any kind of final thoughts before we wrap up today?
No, I'm looking forward to next week. But I think the one last thing that I would say about one of the critical pieces is about supercharging your line managers as well. So we'll talk more about that next time.
Lovely. If you want to find out about some of the comments that we've got around the performance management side, line managers versus people managers, we've got a couple of blogs or podcasts that we've done on that as well. You can do so. Again, just visit the Lace Partners website, go to the Insights section, and you've got all the information you possibly need. That's it from myself today. Steph, thank you very much for joining me.
Thank you.
Hopefully you've enjoyed this very, very short sort of teaser. You can check out all of our videos that we do and our short live streams that we do that we then put onto our YouTube channel as well. If you just search in YouTube for Lace Partners, you will find all of our stuff there. But from myself, from Steph, thanks for watching. And we're going to catch you next time on HR on the Offensive Live. Bye-bye.
Bye.